Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another Tuesday with me. Today, I'm going to talk about immersion and dynamics. The first thing is, what is immersion? Immersion happens in two ways. There is personal immersion and anti-personal immersion. Personal immersion is where you feel you are the character in the game. Anti-personal immersion is where you feel attached to a character in a game and then become more immersed in the story like that. So let's talk about anti-personal immersion. Or why don't we just talk about games that have no immersion at all? Example, every puzzle game ever. Minesweeper. Does anyone ever get immersed in Minesweeper? Do you ever feel like you are the mouse? Or you feel really attached to the mouse as it's clicking the mines? Not really. It's the same with a game like Tetris or Bejeweled, Scrabble, things like that. You don't get immersed in that because there's nothing to really be immersed in or attached to. Anti-personal immersion would be something like Sonic, Mario. Either way, when you're playing a Mario game or a Sonic game or maybe Pac-Man, maybe you feel attached more so to the character you're playing as. Not so much like you're in the game, but you feel immersed in the game. You care about what happens to the character you're playing as, and you become more involved that way. Your mind kind of goes into the game. Now we'll talk about personal immersion, where you feel like you are in the game. This happens with most games where there is a first-person perspective, customization of your character, more likely to occur when you can have dynamic things happen. What is a dynamic event? Dynamic means the opposite of static. It means things change rather than staying the same, or you can't change them. So in a game where you can change things, a lot of the time when you're playing a game, you don't get a lot of choice in what happens. Oh, you have to go do this thing. Why? Because the game says you do. That's just how it is. You are often limited by a game in what you can and cannot do. And the limits are placed on you by the game. However, when you take away some of those limits, your choices in the game can personally affect the story or events around you or how things occur during regular gameplay. And this happens by either giving the player complete freedom or giving the player very specific choices they can make. Typically it's like good or evil, or it's just like there isn't really a story and you can run around and do whatever. Games like Skyrim, you can run around and do whatever. You don't really feel attached to the story at all, but like you can run around and do whatever. Anyways, I kind of forgot where I was going with that. The point is that's like basic definition stuff out of the way. What I wanted to talk about is how to create something that is dynamic, but it isn't so dynamic that it hurts you. Well, if you want to do something that's dynamic and immersive, you don't want to break that immersion with something ridiculous. You can break it with like anything. You could break it with like a really crappy control scheme. You might get really into like a cutscene or something, and as soon as you start playing the game again, your immersion is just ruined because, oh, I have to like press the A button 20 times to open a door or something. Then you become more aware that you were just sitting on the couch and you are not actually a part of the story at all. If you want to keep people immersed into a game and you want to have that game be dynamic, you need to provide choices that people of all places can agree to. Or you don't really worry about story things and just go for it. There's an odd thing that is immersive, and that there's one game that's really big, and I bet you've heard of it, and it's called World of Warcraft 1. I don't know why, I got kind of immersed into it. There wasn't really a story, but because I could play as, I don't know, it just happened. And the thing with that is you can't really affect anything. In newer games like that, like Guild Wars 2, example, you could do a quest that like completely blows up an entire town if you screwed it up. But 20 minutes later you would come back and that town would still be there. And that's because the game designers want everybody to be able to experience the same thing, right? That makes sense. The question is, how about where if somebody does something like that, it would be done forever. That town would just be gone. It would be very, very hard to pull something like that off in a multiplayer thing, for example, with many people, because then all it'll take is one dumb guy who comes along and blows up the town that everybody else was like, haha, we're saved the town. That's a pretty big problem. So, while it would be cool if things like that could happen, and sure, oh, I didn't get to slay Mr. Big Demon Guy because somebody else already did it. You know, that kind of makes sense, but would it work is the question, right? So, I don't know. That's something for you guys to think about. Also, if you ever found yourself particularly immersed in a game or story somewhere, write about it in the comments. Tell us why you felt so immersed into it and whether it was personal attachment or anti-personal attachment. And I'll see you guys next week, hopefully. So, see you around.